whoever came up with the solution to give us tickets at the door, like we at the state fair, and then y'all got to get people on the door. This is our building, y'all. That's what I should be the right people make a decision. Stop playing with us in this building. That's right, son. Stop playing with us, man. This is our damn building. Shut up, y'all, man. And I know y'all ain't have nothing to do with that. That was a move for the white people said we gonna dictate who coming here to this meeting. Y'all got VIP seats with people names on it. This is our damn building. Stop playing with us, man. That's a damn shame that y'all sit here and let them do some shit like that to us. This is our building. We pay taxes to be in here, Sister Andrew. That's not right. That's not right. I don't come in this building to raise hell unless y'all give me a reason to raise hell. And y'all raise hell. Stop giving me a reason to raise hell.
So I need to make a general advisory. I will announce that the rules of the City Council do not allow for public comments at meetings of the full council. Members of the public have the opportunity to comment on city business at the committee level. The purpose of the council meeting is to conduct the business of the city. Consistent with our rules, those who disturb these proceedings and interfere with the ability of the city council to conduct the city's business will be asked to leave. Those who refuse to follow these instructions will be removed from the chamber.
Y'all should be removed. Y'all is a joke.
This will serve as a general warning that those who disrupt this meeting, I have advised that interference with the council's ability to conduct city's business will be removed. The public may attend and observe these proceedings. However, the law prohibits disruption and interference. Those who do so will be removed. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the City Council, I want to welcome everyone to this meeting.
Yeah, your staff locked us out of this room. All these people got in here because we brought them here and your guys are to keep them all out. That was your staff. I know them. I know their name. I know we pay.
I am going to ask security to remove the disruptors from this meeting.
You going to remove everybody from the room?
The disruptors from this meeting.
Well, you're looking at them right there. Go ahead and look at your colleagues.
Excuse me, can I say something before I leave? My name is Daphne Brown. I'm a community supporter. This is my first time coming to the budget meeting, but y'all is full of shit.
Can you please remove the disruptors, please? The council will recess until this group decides that we can have our meeting and conduct the business of everyone in the city of Minneapolis. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the City Council, I want to welcome everyone to this meeting. My name, wait a minute, you just disrupted my meeting and you want me to? My name is Andrea Jenkins. I am the Vice President of the Minneapolis City Council. I will be presiding over this adjourned meeting in absence of President Bender. Accordingly, I will now call this adjourned meeting for August 15th to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Goodman.
Present.
Johnson.
Here.
Palmisano.
Present.
Gordon.
Here.
Kano.
Here.
Reich.
Here.
Fletcher.
Here.
Bender is absent. Schrader.
Here.
Warsami is absent. Cunningham.
Present.
Present. Ellison.
Present.
Vice President Jenkins.
Here.
There are 12 members present.
So before, let the record reflect that we do have a quorum, and the agenda today is before us, and I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That item carries and the agenda is adopted. Before we start with the mayor, I just want to acknowledge that we have community members in the room, and I want to thank them for being a part of this process. I also want to acknowledge Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is in the room today. Thank you for being here, Congresswoman. Also want to acknowledge Hennepin County Commissioners Angela Conley, Commissioner Marion Green, Metropolitan Council Member Robert Lilligren, Minneapolis Public Schools Superintendent Ed Graff, Minneapolis Park Board President Brad Bourne, and if there are any other elected officials present, please Oh, yes, David Wheeler from our BET. Thank you for being here.
Park Board Superintendent, I think.
And Park Board Superintendent Al Bangura. So again, we have one item of business today, and that is the presentation of the mayor's recommended budget for fiscal 2020. With that, it is my pleasure to welcome Mayor Frye to the chamber and invite him to present his budget proposal to us.
Thank you, Council Vice President Andrea Jenkins. Your friendship, your commitment, and your collaboration has meant a great deal to me and to this city. Thank you to our city council members for your input. Having met with each of you individually, your feedback was informative and constructive and has helped me shape this budget. It's good to be joined by leaders from across our city and across our region, including a City Hall alum, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Thank you for being here. I want to thank the other elected officials that have joined us. I want to thank leaders from across our departments, our finance team, and my staff for the long nights and major sweat equity invested in making this budget happen. Your patience and your persistence have been invaluable in building an exceptional budget for 2020 and developing important groundwork for years ahead. We also received important input from community members earlier this year. Your voices were heard and they are reflected in this budget. And now it is my great honor to present to you the City of Minneapolis 2020 recommended budget. And as a matter of housekeeping, here's the same brief disclaimer I offered earlier last year. This is a lot to unpack, and several exciting items didn't make it into these remarks because of time constraints. I'll be more than happy to further discuss any item in the 2020 budget with you, and my door is always open. Last year, we promised you a strong foundation for a stronger future in Minneapolis. We've made good on that commitment, but we must now put our city on the right course for the future, a course that accounts for a cyclical economy, political instability, a warming climate, and our shared values that drive each and every decision.
What you gonna do about those killer cops?
Cities throughout the world succumb to external...
Excuse me, Mayor. Any
Yes.
disruptors will be asked to leave. This is a warning.
Good luck trying to remove us.
This is a warning. We will clear the entire room if we need to.
That's what democracy looks like to you. That's what democracy looks like to you. Nice.
Thank you.
Please continue, Mayor.
Cities throughout the world succumb to external pressures, and residents and neighborhoods rise and fall with the tide. Minneapolis can and should be different. We set a vision. We make tough decisions, and we don't bend to pressures we can predict. We plan for them. In this budget, we plan. We've made decisions resulting in a higher levy today that will help shield us from volatility tomorrow. As I've said before, cities are the laboratories of democracy, experimenting with innovation and groundbreaking policy. When run properly, they're also reliable. We're the government that doesn't shut down, and we should plan so that we keep running no matter what. There are several deliberate decisions we've made in this vein. The projections we've made for revenue from construction permits are intentionally conservative. Last year, we saw development in the city surpass $1.8 billion. We have already hit $1 billion this year, which staff tells me is the earliest we've reached that milestone. In other words, it looks like 2020 is shaping up to be another banner year. But the cyclical nature of our economy says that those trends won't hold forever. An overly ambitious outlook could mean that beneficial programs get cut just when people need them most. Rather than take a political win now with a lower levy, we've been more conservative with our projections, more strategic with our allocations, and therefore can be more confident in our city's future. Second, and many of you know this, our city has a contingency fund that serves as a backup plan in the most difficult and unexpected moments. An insurance against hard times. A city committed to enduring prosperity knows how to weather a storm and understands that you don't wait for the rain to fall before you fix the roof. You plan ahead. For years, our contingency fund has been replenished on a one-time basis, which meant it was always competing against other sexier options. Mayor Hodges began, and we've expedited and finished the process of moving it into ongoing funding, and we're starting with an accelerated investment of $1.6 million in 2020. Third, the state-created Consolidated Tax Increment Finance District, which has funded neighborhood associations and NCR for years, is expiring. This leaves a hole in the city's budget, a big one, of over $7 million in 2021. It would have been easy to kick the can down the road, but I felt strongly that we could not leave our neighborhoods and an entire city department in limbo. Instead, we have laid out a plan to provide funding for this work and an opportunity for council members to make the best decisions for the future, freed from the looming question of whether any funding is available. Finally, the funding that supports our housing inspectors, previously filled by fees from vacant and boarded properties, has dwindled. That's because the number of vacant and boarded properties has dwindled. The upside is we have fewer vacant and boarded properties. The downside is we can no longer pay our employees from that fund. Regulatory services directors have been raising the alarm about this issue for years, and last year I took steps to bridge a gap while our staff sought a permanent solution. Our budget lays out a 2-year plan to ensure that core city functions, like making sure people's housing is safe, are maintained even when times are lean. Big structural changes help set us up for long-term success. And Councilmember Lene Palmisano has consistently put this philosophy into action, most recently in advocating for a 2-year budget cycle. But a prosperous future also depends on inclusive policy and policymaking and program development now. We've begun setting the stage. Based on budget recommendations last year, Stable Homes, Stable Schools is already helping Minneapolis public school students and families secure stable housing. Heading into the second year of the program's 3-year pilot, I believe that Stable Homes, Stable Schools will be held up as a national blueprint for effectively breaking the cycle of generational poverty. Since officially kicking off the program in April, we've provided housing stability for over 237 children. That includes securing housing for 22 families and preventing homelessness for an additional 56 families. And 159 more children and their families are already enrolled in this program. So that's a total of 125 families and 396 children in just a few short months, with numbers poised to grow substantially as students return to school in the next few weeks. Those are a lot of great numbers. But this program isn't just about numbers. It's about kids, it's about their families. Before the social worker at Pillsbury Community referred Desiree and her family to Stable Homes, Stable Schools, they had been homeless for 6 months, moving constantly from hotel to hotel. At one point, Desiree and her husband were forced to make the heart-wrenching decision to split up their family. Their 2 girls with Desiree and their 2 boys with Jorge, to find temporary places to stay. Now, through Stable Homes, Stable Schools, they are starting the school year in a stable home together. We expected success, but we could not have anticipated this level of progress this quickly. We're housing families, and based on the clear data, this program is working, and it is working well. Thank you, Councilman Philippe Cunningham, our in-house youth development expert, for backing Stable Homes, Stable Schools every step of the way. This program is growing by leaps and bounds and will hit full stride later this year. Thank you, Minneapolis Public Schools, the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, Hennepin County, the Polad Foundation, the YMCA, the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association, our entire City Council, and every one of our partners who are collaborating in a profound way to make Stable Homes, Stable Schools a success. Please give them a round of applause for their extraordinary work. Our commitment to expanding access to affordable housing is unwavering. So too is our commitment to economic inclusion. Economic inclusion is the implementation of specific solutions that undo the legacy of institutionalized exclusion of Black, Indigenous, people of color, and immigrants, and further the economic and social independence of these communities. In principle and in practice, this means that these communities are prioritized as the primary beneficiaries of and key partners in our economic decisions. Now, this is so important to me that I want you to say this with me, and if you feel that's important, I invite you to do the same. Please reach under your seats. Check under your seats right now.
Security, I'm going to ask you to please clear the room. Mr. Mayor, the council will take a recess.
I'm okay. I'm just fine. I'm fine.
Jamar!
want to invite you all to say this with me. Economic inclusion. And I support your First Amendment right to express your voice. I support that right to express your voice. Under our city charter, I am also obligated to deliver a budget address. And the residents of Minneapolis do have the right to hear what is in that address. A big part of that budget address is economic inclusion. And I want us all to make sure that we understand the precise definition of economic inclusion. And if you look under your seats, that definition is right there. So I invite you all to have a read, look at the card, and say it with me. Economic inclusion is the implementation of specific solutions that undo the legacy of institutionalized exclusion of Black, Indigenous, people of color, and immigrants, and furthers the economic and social independence of these communities. In principle and in practice, this means that these communities are prioritized as the primary beneficiaries of and key partners in our economic decisions. So I think next time around we can even get the rhythm even better on that one. But now that we've defined the term, let's define the work. So here's the work. Cultural districts represent an intentional strategy whereby people of color who have made and continue to make our city remarkable can reap the benefits of development, of investment, and improvements in their communities while staying in place. Chinatown in New York City, Hyde Park in Chicago, Miami's Little Haiti, Black Wall Street in Tulsa, and soon, due to Councilmember Abdi Warsami's hard work, African Village will be right here in Minneapolis. These are readily recognizable destinations. They're landmarks central to how we tell the story of our nation. In Minneapolis, we have an opportunity to lead. And through our Cultural Districts Initiative, we will. Now we're moving forward with a promise to plan, and plans require specificity. So let's be specific. When I talk about a remarkable community, here's what I believe it rests on. It rests on people with the economic security to forge their own path, entrepreneurs with the fiscal stability to take a great idea and scale it, a system that helps ensure people who have already made these communities great will benefit from their work. When I talk about a remarkable community, I'm talking about a phenomenon, a tangible feeling, a sense of place, the literal experience of knowing you're part of something bigger than you. I remember visiting my grandparents in Queens, New York City, and they'd take me to Bagel Oasis to purchase, you guessed it, everything bagels. It wasn't just a transaction, it was an experience that was made rich by cultural heritage, not just my Ashkenazi Jew heritage. In the same era, you found culture, from Puerto Rican to Italian, Jamaican to Ethiopian to Chinese, bursting from the sidewalk. But this wasn't just about having a new experience. This place was made special because a plethora of different communities had, for generations, created an ecosystem that both gave to neighborhood and was duly supported by it. Cultural districts are intentionally designed to bolster the vision of Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities. Thank you. And here's how we're going to do it. In collaboration with council members Alondra Cano, Andrea Jenkins, Jeremiah Ellison, Abdi Warsami, and Kevin Reich, more than 30 community groups, dozens of subject matter experts and staff, we have identified several cultural districts. From West Broadway to Central, from Cedar Riverside to East Lake, to our oldest cultural districts along Franklin and 38th Street, these communities have long been catalysts for economic development and for innovation. But that development has been systemically hamstrung, and that innovation vanishes without fertile soil. In our urban core, that fertile soil is the lighting, the streets, the building, and yes, the sense of safety. With our incredible partners in our Public Works Department, we're going to ensure that the soil in these districts is set, with investments of $550,000 for prioritized street sweeps, trash pickup, and improved lighting. Our $350,000 investment in Meet Minneapolis, focusing on cultural districts, helps to shine a light on the cultural assets of the districts and drive customers to support the commercial vitality of each. On top of that, we're designating an additional $200,000 for the Great Streets Facade Improvement Program. The focus will be on expanding the program to include interior improvements and address deferred maintenance in cultural districts. Now, it's hard to talk about culture without talking about art. And our $200,000 cultural districts arts investment will support both emerging artists and their destinations. Finally, in cultivating our cultural districts, we will work to ensure that those with deep roots stay firmly planted in community. It used to be the case that if you wanted to own a hardware store, you bought a hardware store. You owned the real estate, you owned the building. You owned the hammers, the nails, and all the other things that you might find in a hardware store. Stores were passed from generation to generation because the family owned them. That's how generational wealth is created. And we know that Black, Indigenous, immigrant, and people of color were locked out of that very exact opportunity. And still today, developers and businesses, especially those of color, continue to face extraordinary barriers in the financial system. Those barriers often leave even the hardest working entrepreneurs with a small but formidable gap between a great idea and turning the key to the building they own. So that's why I'm working with Council Member Jeremiah Ellison to create the Minneapolis Commercial Property Development Fund. Thank you. Seeded with $2.5 million, this revolving fund establishes a no-interest loan that does not get repaid until the property is sold and helps move more people of color closer to truly owning their own businesses and, by extension, realizing their dream. This is a plan, and it's a plan that can work. Thank you. We're certainly not afraid to try new things in Minneapolis. Our city attorney pushed the state legislature to eliminate cash bail. And though the legislature didn't get it done this session, that's not where our efforts stop. Thanks to our new Hennepin County sheriff, she had a partner to act with locally. And we're investing $75,000 in an alternative to cash bail, an archaic and fundamentally unjust practice. Cash bail. Thank you. Cash bail upends families and ruins livelihoods by cutting off an individual's ability to continue to work, to pay rent, to be there for their families, even before they've had their day in court. This is just a first step, but it's one that will be important in creating a more equitable Minneapolis. And just as the cycle of poverty ravages communities, so does the cycle of addiction. The opioid epidemic has left no corner of our city untouched. Our first responders, from firefighters to police to EMS to our community partners, are increasingly strained as that first line of defense. And the impact has been felt acutely by our Native community. In the MPD's 3rd precinct, home to Little Earth, there were 80 overdoses in 2015. Fast forward to 2018, and that number has skyrocketed to 359, a 348% increase in just 3 years. Our communities deserve a strong response, and they deserve a local government committed to breaking the cycle of addiction. That is precisely what our multi-jurisdictional task force recommended earlier this year. And it is precisely why we are investing an additional $400,000 in our city's response to the opioid crisis, including a new hospital-based intervention initiative. Thank you. Through this initiative, people suffering from addiction are supported. They are met by a social service provider at their most vulnerable place and time, at their hospital bed following an overdose. They are connected to resources, support systems, and addiction treatment. They are not treated as outcast society, but as loved members of our community that deserve help. We can't arrest our way out of this crisis. We need public, health-based, and culturally specific solutions. Public health and public safety measures in this budget aren't limited to tackling the opioid crisis. We are allocating additional funding for our group violence intervention initiative, our mental health co-responder program, the city attorney's trauma-informed domestic violence and alternative to cash bail initiatives, our homeless and vulnerable population outreach efforts, additional staff and gear for our fire department, investigative staff for both domestic and sexual assault crimes, and yes, major funding for affordable housing and economic inclusion. For those of you who say we need public safety measures beyond policing, we agree wholeheartedly. And we are putting our money where our mouth is. Our public safety chair, Councilmember Alondra Cano, knows how important it is that we develop a holistic safety agenda for our whole city. And she has been instrumental in helping us develop one. However, we can't afford to ignore the critical roles our police officers must and do play towards ensuring our safety. Our officers respond to 911 calls when they need them most. They are tasked with handling situations ranging from opioid overdoses to homicides. They run in when others run out, and they are charged with doing so compassionately, efficiently, and responsibly. And this past decade, they have been responsible for doing more with less. Our city has grown from 382,000 people in 2010 to about 430,000 today, while our number of sworn officers has remained stagnant. Again, population up, sworn officers stagnant. That's not a sustainable metric. There is no time to waste on false choices and binary options in addressing the causes of crime and violence in our city. We need safety beyond policing, but we still need police. Some of the challenges that our city confronts are new. Some are well tread throughout history. The fall of 1992 is etched into the memory of Minneapolis residents to this day. An officer had just been shot and killed, and the city was still reeling from an officer-involved shooting just 2 years prior in North Minneapolis that resulted in the death of a black teenager. At the time, our city turned to a 25-year-old rookie with a memorable name to serve as a bridge, as a purveyor of hope between community and the department they count on in moments of need and moments of crisis. People turned to this young man with a badge and a uniform because they had come to trust him. That young man was Madera Arredondo. Thank you. When Chief Arredondo made that request to add neighborhood outreach officers, he told me about his own experience, about how he began his career with the MPD, walking Golden Valley Road on the north side, and how he's come to understand community policing. He considered it an abject failure if a squad car responded to his beat. Why? Because it was his community. It was his responsibility to prevent the need for squads to come out by bringing community in. And today, flashing lights are the only police response much of the city knows. Because of diminished numbers, it's the only one we presently allow for. Instead of building those relationships or investing time in community, our officers are pulled from 911 call to 911 call. And as the data shows, even there we are too often falling short due to lack of personnel. If we aren't going to step up and make transformational change now with this chief, then when? With what chief? I stand with Chief Arredondo, and I'll offer him more than comforting words in supporting his vision in strengthening police and community relations. He's made clear that enhancement of police-community relations cannot happen without giving officers the time to walk a beat and engage with community. My 2020 budget includes a recommendation for 8 neighborhood outreach officers so more of our new cops come to understand community police as Chief Arredondo does.
You're fired.
We've added traffic enforcement, a good idea championed by Councilmember Andrew Johnson in keeping with our Vision Zero initiative. Finally, we're adding investigators to the sex crimes and domestic violence units so that our department can be more responsive to the needs of survivors. Thank you. Matthew Desmond, in his landmark work Evicted, rightly identifies safe, secure housing at the heart of keeping that public peace. Last year, we invested a record $40 million in city funding alone, and that support has seeded good work. In the 2019 funding round, we received an all-time high in strong applications to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for new affordable housing development. And thanks to last year's record amount of funding, this fall we will be meeting a record amount of that demand with new units. Supported strongly by Council President Lisa Bender, we invested heavily in the acquisition of naturally occurring affordable housing last year, and recently that investment paid off. Aon, an affordable housing nonprofit, was able to secure 209 units in Whittier, Lindale, and Logan Park. Those units will now remain affordable long-term, helping to prevent resident displacement. We also invested in Minneapolis Homes, leveraging city-owned lots, especially on the north side, as key resources in our push to create more affordable home ownership. The large investment in the Minneapolis Homes program has meant that the total number of units produced and financed are on track to double in 2019, with 90 units approved compared to 40 in the previous years. And Minneapolis Homes' rate of service to households of color is over 70%. This year, we are also injecting another $31 million of city money into our affordable housing budget. And we are maintaining our commitment to capture and dedicate as many state and federal resources for affordable housing as possible, and we've been successful.
Pay your debt.
Taking into account our allocation of affordable housing resources beyond our general fund, we are on track for an annual investment of over $130 million in affordable housing in Minneapolis. Dollar for dollar. No administration in any Minnesota municipality has demonstrated a deeper commitment to affordable housing. We've heard loud and clear the need for a sustainable source of funding for affordable housing. While we'll continue to call for support from other jurisdictions, I'm proud to announce Minneapolis will be taking the lead in starting that sustainable source. We're moving forward with a new 8-year framework with a $52 million baseline and increasing the level of ongoing funding. This plan not only ensures the continued production of affordable housing that we so desperately need, especially at deeply affordable levels, it provides certainty for our development and nonprofit partners and sends a clear message: we are in this for the long haul. So I don't want this point to be lost. That 8-year framework and increase in ongoing funding are only the floor. We can and will go beyond this initial plan as we continue prioritizing additional one-time resources. Speaking of floors, we're investing in 10 of them, along with the future of our enterprise through the new Public Service Center. The city of Minneapolis is home to approximately 4,000 exceptional city employees. In many cases, they could make more money working in the private sector. But they enter work every day with a hop in their step because they care deeply about Minneapolis and they want to make it a better place. They won't stick around if their working conditions are poor, and if we can't retain them, the whole city will suffer. Can we give a huge round of applause for our city employees? Thanks to years of hard work and careful planning, guided by Council Member Lisa Goodman, who has built a legacy of significant projects, we have invested in our new Public Service Center, and by extension, we're investing in our city's human capital. Kitty corner to City Hall. This building will help consolidate employees that were previously spread throughout downtown and enhance an interdepartmental collaboration. And importantly, the new Public Service Center will be customer-oriented, making it easier to navigate our systems and services with a one-stop shop front desk. Not to mention, the long-term cost is cheaper than continuously renting buildings we presently occupy. As Chamber of Commerce President Jonathan Weinhagen told me, businesses make long-term investments to retain and recruit exceptional employees all the time. The city of Minneapolis shouldn't be any different. The Public Service Center will be opening next year. And while we continue working to prioritize the efficacy and efficiency of city government, we're maintaining a focus on business ownership and our private sector partners. Look no further than our first annual Minneapolis Black Business Week. Thanks to the incredible partnership of West Broadway Business and Area Coalition, the Northside Job Creation Team, and many others, we engaged with and highlighted the work of over 800 Black-owned businesses, including nearly 300 Black women makers and innovators, and connected over 200 entrepreneurs to city contracting opportunities. Our Civil Rights Department is tasked with monitoring 407 projects with a combined value of $1.2 billion. By adding a new full-time contract compliance officer, we're proactively implementing our inclusive goals.
And what are you doing about those killer cops?
Thanks to the leadership of Council Vice President Andrea Jenkins, those goals have been set in city policy. She worked alongside our city coordinator's office and our Division of Race Equity to pass our very first racial equity action plan, which includes a 30% goal in inclusive contracting. Thank you to our City Council for your work. From development to hiring, the companies that call Minneapolis home are critical to our success. And one industry in the private sector that we're targeting in a big way is technology. Since 2015, the City of Minneapolis has invested more than $2 million in scholarships to support low-income Minneapolis residents who want to enter tech careers through MSP Tech Hire. Our partners and employers from across Minneapolis are increasing the talent pool for our businesses. More than 1,300 people who participated in accelerated tech hire training are now working with over 500 tech employers. On average, they've seen a wage increase of $16,000 annually. In a tech industry that is woefully unrepresentative of our communities nationally, tech hire graduates are 30% people of color and 40% women. In 2020, we are investing an additional $250,000 in MSP tech hire to build on that progress. And if we're concerned about our economic future, we'd better be concerned with the future of our planet. Local governments across the country are wrestling with the unfolding impacts of climate change and moving with a renewed sense of urgency to step up and address the climate crisis, a defining social justice issue of our generation. Some are content with being on the cutting edge of the fight to curb climate change. In Minneapolis, we are working to set the curve. We are continuing to invest in our climate work with another $260,000 in ongoing funding added this year, bringing our ongoing investments in sustainability to over $3 million. The new investment will be put toward our 4D Affordable Housing Preservation Program, which includes resources for sustainability upgrades, further cementing our conviction that affordable housing and climate are intrinsically linked. We'll also be doubling down on enforcing our nationally recognized benchmarking ordinances aimed at maximizing energy efficiency in buildings all across our city. And those laws have gained the national attention thanks to the excellent work of Council members Jeremy Schrader and Council member Cam Gordon. Beyond our buildings, we know that the fight to curb climate change is very much playing out on our streets. So we're taking steps to both reduce greenhouse gas emissions and congestion with funding for mobility hubs. In mobility hubs, new ways to get around, like electric vehicles and bike sharing, literally meet the traditional forms of mass transit, like bus and trains. By making these alternatives more readily available throughout Minneapolis, we'll do right by the environment while making it more convenient for our residents to get around. We're looking out for pedestrians, too. Navigating the sidewalks during snowy months in Minneapolis can be difficult, especially for those with disabilities and for our seniors. Intersections often form the point of most significant hardship. And so, with support from Councilmember Steve Fletcher, we are accelerating corner clearance and providing greater mobility year-round for everyone. Throughout the first 2 years of this administration, we've built important partnerships across our city and across sectors. Last year, we invested $500,000 in Village Financial Cooperative, the only... Thank you. The only Black-owned credit union and community development financial institution in the state of Minnesota. Since then, the Village team has been kicking butt and taking names. Seriously, they are taking a lot of names. They've signed up over 1,900 names for deposit and established themselves as a budding, community-oriented financial option with over $5 million pledged. Let's keep that momentum going. So I'm honored to announce that we will be investing $500,000 in the continued development of this transformational entity. And we hope that others match and exceed our commitment. This model can and should be replicated. Just ask Councilmember Reich, our foremost leader in cooperatives. He's called for the implementation of cooperative ideals, and we are delivering through our new Cultural Districts Co-op and Employee Owner Opportunity Fund. We want to start and grow a cooperative, but you don't know how? No problem. We will now guide you through the process, and in cultural districts, we'll provide matching funds to see the cooperative through to fruition. So Minneapolis is known for many things. We're known for our park system. We're known for Prince and First Avenue. We're known for all things purple. We're also known for voting in droves. But exercising your right to vote isn't limited to showing up at a polling place on Election Day. Early voting is helping drive our status as the top vote-delivering city in many ways. With a new $4 million investment and the leadership of our city clerk, we can provide even more people in Minneapolis with an opportunity to cast their ballot. We're setting out to establish 3 7-day early voting centers in North and in South and at the University of Minnesota, along with the staff needed to support those locations. Next year's vote will be a historic one, and again, we are working to maximize turnout in our city. Some institutions tell our city's story better than any individual can. Our world-class park system is one such institution. The independent nature of our park board has paid dividends, and the investments we've made have stood the test of time. In fact, my favorite park bench in the city, located in Chute Square, is a really old one. It bears the insignia WPA for the Works Progress Administration from the Roosevelt era. Today, that bench is where Sarah and I eat our lunch on the weekends. This is our simple pleasure, a simple pleasure that this particular bench has afforded to Minneapolis residents since 1942. But parks elicit more than just simple pleasures. They've supported the health, the equity, and vitality of our city. They support youth development, and they are certainly deserving of our ongoing support. And yes, we made that commitment as part of our 20-year Parks and Streets funding plan. By committing an additional $11 million on an annual basis, we've helped ensure our parks can fund necessary upkeeps and capital needs. Keeping our crown jewel also requires that we go even further, and we are. On top of last year's $950,000 increase, this year we are increasing the park board budget even more, to the tune of $1.23 million. Strong commitments in our city's earliest days and throughout the 20th century have helped make Minneapolis what it is today. By keeping that tradition alive, more couples and families will enjoy clean, safe parks and park benches for decades to come. So after months of running and rerunning numbers, meeting with department leadership, council members, stakeholders, and community members, after building out innovative funding plans for fueling inclusive economic growth, expanding access to affordable housing, and improving police-community relations, it seems a shame to boil it all down to a single number. But the levy has real impacts on the people of Minneapolis, and we have an obligation to residents, a fiduciary duty to spend their tax dollars wisely and efficiently. We started the year with a projected levy increase of 7.02%. That was just to honor ongoing commitments and maintain current service levels. Through hard work and harder decisions, we are now at a 6.95% levy. And as I mentioned in the opening, this is a levy that sets the stage for what's next and doesn't shy away from doing the right thing even when it's tough. In Minneapolis, we can and must be united. We are bound by a shared duty to our city, to one another, to advancing progress here no matter what the world may throw our way. Robert Kennedy, who decades ago boldly confronted many of the challenges we still face today, eloquently summed up an attitude built right into how Minneapolis does business. Let no one be discouraged by the belief there is nothing one person can do against the enormous array of the world's misery, ignorance, and violence. Few will have the greatness to bend history, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events. And in the total of all those acts will be written the history of a generation. Let the totality of our acts of the events that we change, not just talking about it, but doing it. Be the making of a truly inclusive Minneapolis. Let that inclusive work be the history of a generation. Let that be the history of Minneapolis. Thank you. 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 Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Fry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Colleagues, the mayor has submitted his 2020 recommended budget to us, which is now the business before this body. Councilmember Palmisano, I would recognize you for a motion to refer this matter to the Budget Committee.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I move to refer the mayor's recommended 2020 budget to the Budget Committee for its review and consideration.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay.
Nay! Nay! People say nay!
That carries. The mayor's recommended 2020 budget is referred to the Budget Committee. Councilmember Palmisano, I recognize you for a brief update on the process of the budget going forward.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Budget Committee will take up consideration of the mayor's recommended budget on September 9th, starting at 1:30, at which time our finance team will begin by providing a high-level overview of the proposed budget. We anticipate starting departmental hearings the following Thursday, September 12th at 9:30 a.m. Department hearings and budget presentations will continue through the end of October. And following the success of last year's process, we have planned a total of 3 public hearings on the budget. The first, which will be conducted by the committee, is tentatively set for Thursday, November 7th at 9:30. Following that, we expect to conduct the second hearing, which is the statutorial required truth in taxation hearing, on Wednesday, December 4th at 6:05 p.m. We anticipate a budget markup on Friday, December 6th, followed by the third and final public hearing on Wednesday, December 11th at 6:05 p.m., which will be followed by a formal vote and adoption of the budget that same night. A full calendar with all these dates and times, along with a schedule of department hearings, has been circulated to all ward offices and will be added in limbs for public notice and access.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. And again, I just want to thank the mayor and all of the community members who showed up to express their concerns, discuss, and all of the issues that have been expressed this morning. I know that I speak for my colleagues when I say that we appreciate your leadership, and we look forward to getting into the details of this proposed budget. We now move to the order of announcements. I will ask if there are any announcements from the dais. Anyone? With that, we have concluded our agenda for today, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Nay. That carries, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.